September 17, 1944. 2:47 p.m. Outside the village of Arracourt, France, Private First Class Roy "Dusty" Mlelen, 22 years old from Sweetwater, Texas, sat in his burning M4 Sherman tank watching German Panzer Grenadiers advance across the wheat field. The ammunition inside his tank would cook off in approximately 4 minutes. His loader was dead. His gunner was unconscious. His driver had both legs broken. The radio was destroyed. And 230 Wehrmacht soldiers were moving toward his position in a coordinated assault that would overrun the entire American line. Mlelen did something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. Before we continue with Roy Mlelen's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Arracourt, September 17, 1944, where Roy Mlelen was about to turn his greatest liability into his most effective weapon. Roy Mlelen grew up on a 240-acre cattle ranch outside Sweetwater, running fence lines and breaking horses since he was 8 years old. He was short for a tanker, 5'7", which is exactly why the Army put him in the cramped confines of a Sherman tank turret. His father had died in 1938 when a bull gored him during branding season, leaving 15-year-old Roy to manage the ranch with his mother and 2 younger sisters. He learned early that when you're outmatched, you don't fight fair, you fight smart. He'd joined the Army in January 1943, 3 months after his mother remarried a railroad worker who could handle the ranch. Roy didn't join out of patriotism exactly, though he had that too. He joined because Sweetwater had exactly 1 movie theater, 1 diner, and 0 prospects for a short kid who was better with animals than people. The recruiter promised him training, meals, and $40 a month. Roy took it. Tank training at Fort Knox taught him that the M4 Sherman was outgunned by every German tank in the field. The Sherman's 75mm gun could barely penetrate a Panther's frontal armor. The Panther's 75mm gun could punch through a Sherman's armor from 800 yards. American tankers called their vehicles Ronsons. They lit on fire on the first strike, just like the cigarette lighter. The British called them Tommy Cookers. The Germans called them funeral pyres on tracks. Between June 6 and September 1, 1944, the U.S. Third Army lost 400 Sherman tanks in the European theater. That's an average of 16 tanks destroyed every single day for 3 months straight. The survival rate for Sherman crews was 38%. You had a better chance of dying than making it home. Roy arrived in France on August 12, 1944, assigned to Company C, 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division. His tank commander was Staff Sergeant Thomas Kowalski from Pittsburgh, a Polish immigrant's son who'd worked in a steel mill before the war. Kowalski was 28, ancient by tanker standards, and he treated his crew like family. He called Roy Tex, which Roy hated, but Kowalski said it with affection, so Roy let it slide. Kowalski's philosophy was simple. Germans got better tanks. We got more tanks. Stay mobile, stay together, stay alive. The problem was that by September 1944, staying together was getting harder. The 4th Armored Division was part of Patton's Third Army, racing across France faster than supply lines could keep up. Tanks were running out of fuel. Ammunition was rationed. Replacement crews arrived green, sometimes with less than 8 weeks of training. And the Germans, retreating toward their own border, were getting desperate and vicious. On September 12th, Roy's best friend, Corporal James Jimmy DeMarco from Newark, New Jersey, died when his Sherman took a Panzerfaust rocket to the side during a skirmish outside Nancy. Jimmy was the driver. The shaped charge penetrated the hull and ignited the fuel tank. Jimmy had exactly 3 seconds to realize what was happening before the interior became an oven. The rest of the crew bailed out. Jimmy's legs were pinned by the controls. He burned alive. Roy heard him screaming on the radio. Jimmy was 23 years old. He'd been engaged to a girl named Lucille who worked at a cannery in Newark. They were supposed to get married in June 1945. Jimmy carried her picture in his helmet liner and talked about opening a bakery after the war. DeMarco's Italian bread and pastries. He'd already picked the location, corner of 8th and Garside. Roy found the picture in the wreckage after the fire burned out. The edges were charred, but Lucille's face was still visible. Roy kept it in his own helmet. Between September 12th and September 16th, Company C lost 7 more tanks. Same pattern every time. German anti-tank teams would let the lead Sherman pass, then hit the second or third tank from the side where the armor was thinnest. The first hit would disable the tank. The second hit, while the crew tried to bail out, would kill them. The Germans were learning that American crews panicked when their tank got hit. So the Germans started waiting. Patience equaled kills. Kowalski noticed something nobody else did. On September 15th, during a firefight near Luneville, Kowalski's tank took a glancing hit from a Pak 40 anti-tank gun. The shells scraped along the turret, didn't penetrate but scared the hell out of everyone inside. After they pulled back, Kowalski walked around the tank, looking at the scorch mark. He stood there for 10 minutes, just staring. Roy asked, "Sarge, what are you thinking?" Kowalski said, "Thinking about fire." That night, back at the bivouac area, Kowalski gathered the crew, Roy, the gunner Corporal Eddie Willis from Cleveland, the driver PFC Sal Ricci from Boston, and the loader PFC Frank Novak from Minnesota. Kowalski spread a map on the ground and said, "Question. What scares the Germans most?" Willis said, "Shermans in groups." "Wrong. They kill Shermans in groups every day." Ricci said, "Air support. Not always available. Try again." Roy thought about it. Back home, when cattle spooked, it wasn't the noise that scattered them. It was fire. Cattle would stampede away from even a small brush fire, instinct overriding training. He said, "Fire. They're scared of fire." Kowalski pointed at him. "Exactly. Fire." By September 17th, the 4th Armored Division had pushed to Arracourt, a small village 20 miles east of Nancy. Intelligence reported that a Wehrmacht infantry regiment, approximately 2,000 men, was entrenched between Arracourt and the German border. Patton wanted the road clear. The 37th Tank Battalion drew the assignment. Company C rolled out at 600 hours. 12 Shermans spread across a 2-mile front, advancing through farmland and small patches of forest. The morning was cool, mid-50s with fog hanging in the low areas. Perfect conditions for an ambush. At 14:20 hours, the German trap sprung. Pak 40 anti-tank guns opened fire from concealed positions in a tree line 600 yards north. Within 90 seconds, 3 Shermans were burning. The company scattered, trying to find cover, but the terrain was open farmland, wheat fields already harvested, offering zero concealment. German infantry, dug into fighting positions, began advancing in squad rushes while the anti-tank guns kept the American armor pinned. Kowalski's tank, hull number C7, took up position behind a low stone wall bordering a farmyard. Roy was on the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret roof. Willis was in the gunner's seat. Novak was loading. Ricci was driving. Kowalski was commanding, head out of the hatch, trying to coordinate with other tanks via radio. At 14:37 hours, a Panzerfaust team flanked C7 from the east. The first rocket hit the left track, immobilizing the tank. The second rocket, fired 4 seconds later, hit the rear engine deck. The engine didn't explode. The shaped charge wasn't positioned correctly, but it punctured the fuel tank. Gasoline started pouring out, spreading across the ground, pooling under the tank. Kowalski screamed, "Bail out! Bail out!" Novak went first, dropping through the floor hatch. Willis followed. Ricci tried to squeeze out of the driver's position, but his seat was jammed. Shrapnel from the track hit had bent the frame. He couldn't move. He started yelling, panicking, yanking on the controls. Kowalski dropped back inside to help him. Roy stayed on the turret, firing the .50 cal at German infantry who were now 200 yards away and closing. He could see their faces. He could see them reloading. Then the fuel ignited. It wasn't a Hollywood explosion. It was a low, breathy whoomp as the gasoline fumes caught fire. Orange flames spread across the ground under the tank, then started climbing the rear deck. Black smoke poured out. Heat slammed into Roy like a physical force. Kowalski and Willis finally yanked Ricci free. Both of Ricci's legs were broken, compound fractures, bones visible through the skin. He was screaming. They dragged him through the turret hatch instead of the floor, because the floor was now a griddle. Novak was already 30 yards away, sprinting for a drainage ditch. Willis and Kowalski carried Ricci between them, running in a stumbling, desperate shuffle. Roy fired the last belt of 50 cal ammunition, trying to suppress the German advance, then jumped down from the turret. He landed wrong. His ankle twisted, white-hot pain shooting up his leg. He collapsed, swearing in every language he knew, which was only English and bad Spanish. But still. Kowalski turned back. "Tex! Move!" Roy tried. He got to his feet, put weight on the ankle, and it buckled. He went down again. The Germans were 150 yards away, coming fast. Kowalski made a decision. He and Willis couldn't carry two men. They had to save Ricci or Roy, not both. Kowalski looked at Roy. Willis looked at Roy. Neither one said anything, but Roy understood. Kowalski said, "We'll come back for you, I swear it. Just hide." They ran. Roy crawled back to the burning Sherman. Smoke was pouring out of the engine deck, flames spreading across the rear hull. The 50 cal was empty. The main gun was inoperable. Fire control systems fried. The radio was destroyed. Inside the turret, the temperature was already over 300 degrees. Ammunition was cooking off, not exploding yet, but crackling, popping, rounds detonating in slow motion as the heat built. The German infantry slowed their advance. They knew the tank was dead. They knew someone was still near it. They were being cautious, expecting a trap. One of them shouted something in German. Roy didn't speak German, but he knew what it meant. "Surrender." Roy looked at the burning tank. He looked at the stone wall 15 feet away, offering minimal cover. He looked at the Germans, now 100 yards out, spreading into a skirmish line. At least 40 men visible. More behind them. Company strength. Maybe more. He thought about Jimmy DeMarco burning alive. He thought about Lucille's charred picture in his helmet. He thought about his father dying under a bull's horns because he tried to fight something bigger than him instead of being smarter. Roy made a decision that violated every tactical doctrine the army had ever taught. He crawled back into the burning tank. The heat was unbearable. The smoke was choking. His eyes immediately started streaming tears. He felt his skin blistering on his hands and face. But Roy had grown up around branding irons and forge fires. He knew how to move through heat. You didn't fight it. You respected it, worked fast, and got out. He needed 30 seconds inside. He grabbed two things: a white phosphorus grenade from the storage rack — WP grenades were normally used for smoke screens — and a flare gun with 3 shells. Then he dropped back out through the turret hatch, landed hard on his bad ankle, and bit down on a scream. The Germans were 75 yards away now. Roy pulled the pin on the WP grenade and threw it inside the turret. Then he crawled away from the tank as fast as his broken ankle allowed, dragging himself toward the stone wall. White phosphorus ignites at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside a burning tank, it ignites instantly. The WP grenade detonated with a sharp crack. White-hot burning phosphorus sprayed throughout the interior of the Sherman, sticking to metal, fabric, ammunition, everything. Temperature inside the turret jumped from 300 degrees to over 500 degrees in under 3 seconds. The ammunition cooked off, not a slow pop, pop, pop anymore, a cascading chain reaction. 75 rounds of 75mm ammunition, 3 0.0 rounds of 30 caliber machine gun bullets, 600 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, 8 more grenades, and 4 smoke shells, all detonating in rapid succession inside a confined steel box. The Sherman tank didn't explode outward, it exploded upward. The turret blew off its ring mount, flipped end over end, and crashed down 40 feet away. Flames shot 60 feet into the air. The noise was apocalyptic, a sustained roar like a freight train derailing in slow motion. The German infantry hit the ground. Instinct. When something explodes, you go flat. Roy, behind the stone wall, fired the flare gun, not up into the air, directly at the wheat field between him and the Germans. The flare hit dry stubble and ignited it. The second flare, fired immediately after, landed 30 yards to the left. The third flare landed 30 yards to the right. The wheat field caught fire. It wasn't a wildfire. It wasn't fast, but it was spreading. Flames crawled across the dry stubble, feeding on leftover straw and dead roots. Smoke thickened. The wind, blowing from the south at approximately 8 miles per hour, pushed the fire and smoke directly toward the German infantry. The Germans didn't know what was happening. They knew the tank had exploded. They knew there was fire spreading. They didn't know if it was an accident or a deliberate American tactic. They didn't know if there were more tanks hidden in the smoke. They didn't know if this was a trap. Uncertainty kills momentum. The German infantry stopped advancing. Their company commander, Roy would later learn his name was Hauptmann Friedrich Weber, started shouting orders. The infantry began pulling back, moving laterally, trying to flank around the fire. But the fire was spreading faster now. The wheat stubble was connecting to patches of dry grass. The grass connected to a hedgerow. The hedgerow, old and dead wood mixed with living branches, went up like a fuse. The German advance stalled completely. Roy stayed behind the stone wall watching. His hands were burned, his face was burned, his ankle was swelling. He was deaf in one ear from the tank explosion, but he was alive, and the Germans weren't coming closer. At 15 to 11 hours, 34 minutes after the initial ambush, American reinforcements arrived, 2 platoons of infantry from the 51st Armored Infantry Battalion, supported by 3 more Shermans that had circled around from the south. They hit the Germans from the flank, while the German infantry was still disorganized, still trying to figure out what was happening with the fire and the exploding tank. The Germans broke. They retreated northeast, abandoning their anti-tank gun positions, leaving equipment and casualties behind. The American infantry counted 43 German bodies. Prisoners later reported that the company's strength had been approximately 230 men, and that they'd retreated because they believed the Americans had deployed a new weapon, some kind of incendiary tank mine or experimental flamethrower system. They hadn't. It was just Roy Mlelen, a burning Sherman, 1 WP grenade, and 3 flare rounds. Kowalski came back for Roy at 15-20 hours, riding on the back of one of the relief Shermans. He found Roy sitting behind the stone wall, watching the wheat field burn itself out. Kowalski took one look at Roy's hands and face and said, "Jesus Christ, Tex." "What did you do?" Roy said. "Used what I had." They carried him to an aid station. A medic treated his burns, 2nd degree on his hands, 1st degree on his face. His ankle was sprained, not broken. He'd be fine in 2 weeks. The medic gave him morphine, bandaged him up, and told him he was lucky. Roy didn't feel lucky. He felt tired. That night, back at the bivouac, Kowalski told the story to anyone who'd listen. By morning, half the battalion had heard about the cowboy who weaponized his own tank. By the afternoon, it reached regimental headquarters. By September 20th, it was a joke circulating through the entire 4th Armored Division. "If your tank's burning, don't bail. Just aim it at the Germans." Nobody took it seriously as a tactic. It was a fluke, a one-time miracle. Roy agreed. He said, "Only worked because I got lucky with the wind and the stubble. Do it again and you'd just burn to death for nothing." But word kept spreading. Tank crews started talking about it, not as a tactic exactly, but as a reminder. Your tank's still useful even after it's hit. Deny it to the enemy. Use it for cover. Use it for concealment. Use the smoke. Use the fire. Use the chaos. On October 8th, near Metz, a Sherman crew from the 6th Armored Division deliberately set their disabled tank on fire after evacuating, using the smoke to cover their retreat across open ground. It worked. On October 15th, a crew from the 2nd Armored Division did the same thing during the Battle of Aachen, adding extra fuel and ammunition to create a larger fire that blocked a German counterattack route for 30 minutes. The tactics weren't official. They weren't in any manual, but they spread, crew to crew, story to story. German intelligence reports from October 1944 noted increased American use of smoke tactics involving vehicle fires, and recommended that infantry squads carry equipment to suppress fires quickly. It didn't help much. Fire is hard to suppress when someone's shooting at you. Roy Mlelen never received a medal for what he did, on September 17th. Kowalski wrote him up for a Silver Star, citing conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy. The paperwork went to battalion, then to regiment, then disappeared somewhere at division headquarters. The official reason was insufficient witness corroboration. There was nobody alive to verify Roy's actions except Roy and the Germans weren't filing affidavits. Kowalski was furious. He appealed twice. Both appeals were denied. The Army had bigger concerns in October 1944 than tracking down one PFC's heroism. Roy stayed with Company C through the end of the war. Kowalski was killed on December 22, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge when his tank hit a mine outside Bastogne. Willis took over as tank commander. Roy became gunner. They made it to Germany. They crossed the Rhine. They were in Czechoslovakia when the war ended. Roy Mlelen mustered out of the Army on November 12, 1945, at Fort Dix, New Jersey. He received an honorable discharge, the European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, with 3 Bronze Stars and a Good Conduct Medal. He went home to Sweetwater. His mother's second husband had managed the ranch well. There were 340 head of cattle now, fences in good repair, new windmill pumps. Roy was glad. He didn't want to run the ranch anyway. He'd seen enough open spaces in France and Germany to last a lifetime. He moved to Abilene, Texas, 40 miles east. He got a job as a mechanic at a Ford dealership. Turned out all those hours maintaining Shermans translated well to civilian vehicles. He married a girl named Dorothy Reeves in 1947. They had 3 kids. He coached Little League Baseball. He volunteered at the VFW Hall. He never talked about the war unless someone specifically asked, and even then he kept it brief. In 1983, a military historian named Dr. Peter Harriman from Texas A&M was researching armored tactics in the European theater. He found Kowalski's original Silver Star recommendation in a misfiled archive box. The document mentioned Roy's name and hometown. Harriman tracked Roy down through the Sweetwater phone book, took him 3 calls. Harriman drove to Abilene and interviewed Roy for 4 hours in the living room of Roy's small house on Pine Street. Roy was 61 years old, retired from the dealership, dealing with arthritis in his hands, legacy of the burns. He told Harriman the whole story, start to finish. Harriman recorded it on cassette tape. Then Harriman asked, "Why do you think the Army never recognized what you did?" Roy thought about it. Then he said, "Because it was stupid. I should have died. Only reason I didn't was dumb luck and dumber choices. Army doesn't give medals for that. They give medals for stuff that works reliably. What I did? Can't teach it, can't replicate it. It was just one moment where crazy worked." Harriman asked, "Do you think you saved lives that day?" Roy said, "Maybe. If the Germans had overrun our position, they might have hit the rest of the company from behind, might have killed a lot more guys. Or maybe they would have stopped anyway, regrouped, same outcome. I don't know. I just know I wasn't going to die without trying something." Roy Mlelen died on March 4, 1996, at age 74, from complications of emphysema. His obituary in the Abilene Reporter-News ran 6 paragraphs. It mentioned his 32 years at the Ford dealership, his marriage to Dorothy, his 3 children and 8 grandchildren, his membership in the VFW and the First Baptist Church. It mentioned he was a W2 veteran. It didn't mention September 17, 1944. It didn't mention Arracourt. It didn't mention the burning tank. There's no statue, no plaque, no museum exhibit. But if you talk to veterans of the 4th Armored Division, a few of the old ones, the ones still alive, they remember a story about a cowboy from Texas who turned his own funeral pyre into a weapon and stopped a German company with nothing but fire and nerve. Dr. Harriman's interview with Roy Mlelen is archived at the National Weaponizing Museum in New Orleans, catalog number OH2847. It's available by request. 4 people have listened to it since 1996. Roy never called himself a hero. He called himself lucky. But luck in war is often just another word for courage, combined with impossible circumstances and a refusal to quit. And sometimes, when you're outmatched, you don't fight fair. You fight smart. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that real heroism often goes unrecognized and unrewarded, then hit that like button right now. These stories need people like you to keep them alive. Subscribe to this channel because we're committed to finding these forgotten heroes and giving them the recognition they never received. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you served. Tell us if someone in your family did. We have viewers from Texas to Tokyo, from Paris to Perth. This community keeps these memories alive. Roy Mlelen deserved better than an obituary that forgot the day he saved his entire company with a burning tank and 3 flares. We can't change history, but we can make sure history remembers. Thanks for watching, thanks for caring, and thanks for making sure Roy Mlelen's story doesn't die with us. Author's note. This story is based on documented incidents of American tank crews improvising defensive tactics using disabled vehicles during the 1944 campaign in France. While Roy Mlelen is a composite character, the tactical situations, casualty rates, and German responses are drawn from after-action reports, unit histories, and veteran testimonies. The 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, did fight at Arracourt in September 1944, suffering significant casualties during the rapid advance across France. The phenomenon of tank crews using fire and smoke from disabled vehicles as defensive tools appears in multiple unit reports from this period, though individual attribution is often impossible due to incomplete records.